All right. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really delighted to be with all of you. I've, actually known Cheryl for many years, and she and I have, in various capacities, been part of PopTech for probably each of us 9 years or more now. Speak of the devil, are your ears ringing? You're tardy? Is there an attendance sheet in here? So it's great to hear that several of you are aware of PopTech. And have any of you actually been to the conference? I think we have to do something about that this year. Well, all right. Well, so we're going to get started. And let's just...
Would you like atmospheric lights?
If people can see the slides, we will be fine. There's a couple little movies in here. If it's too bright, maybe we'll just turn down. Yeah, that'll be great.
That's what we call atmospheric.
There you go. I think this title certainly speaks to what I thought about when I was a very young person, and I think a lot of people in this room probably relate to this question. Most of humanity aspires to making a difference in the world, and some of us have headier ideas. I know I did as a child, which probably drove my parents a little bit nuts. But when I was thinking about this notion of changing the world, and we hear about this all the time. It's in the popular media. It's there are millions of points of contact with in terms of this greater purpose to serve. And I started thinking about, what do you really, if you really want to change the world, or you really want to make a difference in the world, which might be the better way to put it, what are some of the things you really need to be able to do? If I were writing the job description, what are the necessary skills part? And I'm going to speak a lot from my own personal experience and the experiences that have been shared with me over the last 25 or 30 years, with people who were very like-minded. So a lot of it is, being in the right place at the right time. There's just certain opportunities that you fall into that lend themselves and enable you to actually be part of a significant change movement. I think the most important one is the second one. This notion that you really love what you do. There's a passion. When you wake up in the morning, you don't go, oh, I have to go to that job today. There's something that every day there's something new that you find intriguing, and you really deeply respect those you work with and the reason you walk in the door or in the field or wherever you're walking into. I think another really important thing, and I mean this applies to probably every career, but having a sense of curiosity. I think people who aren't curious don't tend to take on big issue items because you have to always be asking questions. And I think as important as asking questions, you have to have a love for finding answers. When I was in high school, I was like an absolute nerd. I actually had my own carol at the library. Now, my kids don't, they said, what's a carol? Because they actually don't go to the library anymore. They reminded me that they could do all their research on the computer. But I actually had a little carrel in the library. I had all my books lined up on there. And when I went to college, I sought out the same thing because I loved to research things. So that's part of a curiosity thing. Being a consummate collaborator and a team player, Lone Rangers, they can be effective, but sometimes the path is a little bit harder because most of us can only accomplish so much as an individual, and we can accomplish a lot more when we're working with a larger group. The one that this is usually the last one is a deterrent for many people. The ability to raise money or the bravery to ask for money might be a better way to put it. And I honed this skill when I was about 7, and I developed what I call the 5-word pitch. And it was very simple. it was trick or treat for UNICEF. And I was like the guy who, or the gal who won the UNICEF party prize every year because my brother hated trick-or-treating with me. I would go up to the door and he just wanted the candy. He'd leave his UNICEF carton in the bag and just get the candy. And I would actually get invited in to the people go, well, what are you asking for money for? What's this money for? And I'd go, I'd be happy to come in and tell you about it. And my brother would be like, my candy yield is cutting in half right now. Just enough with the money thing. So again, you know, when I think about this idea, I often think about my own career path, and for me, I would say I was an accidental innovator. There was no such thing as a social innovator until really as little as 10 years ago or so, when that field really took off and became defined. But in 1982, in January of 1982, I was working in public health in Los Angeles, and I became enmeshed in the AIDS epidemic, which was not even called AIDS at that time. And like everybody else who got involved early on in the AIDS epidemic as care providers or systems designers or what have you, we all got involved by accident because we were in the right place at the right time. And as hard as it was to deal with the multitude of challenges and the really extremely depressing and sad situation in the first 20 years really of the epidemic, it was also just an amazing opportunity. It's like you don't get a brand new infectious disease that comes along more than once in a lifetime usually, and an issue that had the magnitude of touching on health care and social issues and ethical challenges was really an unbelievable situation to be in. And you were also all learning together. So in those early days, there were maybe 400 people in the entire country that were dealing with this as a routine day-to-day thing. And you actually pretty much knew each other. Everybody knew one another. So it was quite intoxicating from an intellectual point of view, from a let's find a way to solve this really hard challenge. It was great. I mean, the downside was, you know, all of our patients died. We dealt with situations where 3 generations in a single family all died of AIDS. We dealt with really challenging ethical issues and dilemmas. We dealt with civil liberties issues where kids weren't allowed to go to school. You know, it really ran the gamut, but it was an extraordinary education that I don't think I could ever dream of replicating. And I think when I was in LA, and then I was eventually recruited to Yale to run a brand new AIDS program there, which was another amazing opportunity. And the nice thing about being in a really big university like that is you have a multitude of departments that you can work with. When you have a legal issue, you had the law school. If you had an ethical issue, you have a big ethics department. So we actually put together what we in those days called a multidisciplinary task force. And it was unusual in the medical center, which was very siloed. You know, the people that dealt with cancer all worked in the cancer department and da-da-da-da-da. But our program was unique because the illnesses that revolved around AIDS touched on every department in the medical center. And then we also cared for children and adults. So that was quite unusual, where you had a program that dealt with both children and adults simultaneously. And because of all these other issues, we actually spread a big net out across the university, which was a really amazing opportunity to start to look at this thing that we now call cross-sector collaboration, which is a big underlying current in, as you know, in social innovation. So I pretty much did nothing but HIV and AIDS work for almost 25 years. And then I have to say, it got a little boring because there were good treatments, and the challenges weren't new. A lot of the big hard challenges had actually gotten better and been resolved, or at least were a little bit more matter of fact. And I thought, well, I feel like I've done everything I ever could have dreamed of doing, and so it was time to start to shift gears. And what I realized is all that experience I had gained applied to like almost everything I could possibly want to do. So for about 10 years, I actually ran a consultancy because I didn't really want to work for any one place. That didn't seem like the right fit for me at the time. And all the stuff I learned through the AIDS program, I learned how to raise money, I learned how to solve problems, I learned how to put together multidisciplinary teams, really helped me do all my other work. And, I think the second little point, the stuff that's not in the job description is actually really what shapes you. You never want anybody on your team who says, well, I don't think that's in my job description, so I'm not going to do that. Or, gee, that's her problem or his role. I've learned the most by doing things that weren't in my job description, and I think that's something that's really important to remember, particularly in the areas of interest that you guys have in the fields and places you're going to be going into. Creating your own job description is way better than being given one. And for me, I'm not so good at being the desk person. I don't like to sit at my desk all day long or be in one place for too long. So, always having a foot in the field is essential. And in any innovation work, it's actually mandatory. Cheryl and I have been working with one of our past fellows from PopTech, and this notion of really learning from the communities you serve, being part of those communities, not designing things from an ivory tower and laying them on some other geography, which I'll talk a little bit about when I talk about one of the PopTech projects. It's that notion Paul Pollock puts forth of design with, not for. Never think up a solution when you don't know the context, and never create solutions for people because they probably won't receive them well, and they'll fail. So those are some of the things that have really stuck with me over the course of my career as I've made transitions and did different types of work. And there are the things that I try to share with my staff and with my colleagues that I work with outside of the PopTech organization. The other thing I think I've really learned over my career, and mostly because I had the extremely good fortune of having two amazing mentors in my early days of my work in HIV and AIDS. And I think sometimes when I think about people I know who are really fabulous leaders, there's one thing they all have in common. They will always speak about the influence a mentor had on them and their career development. So it's actually a really important thing. And the notion of mentoring goes all the way back to ancient Greece. And in fact, mentor was the name of a great mentor to one of the Greek gods. So the term is actually the name of somebody from ancient Greek literature. I think, too, sometimes people think of mentors as being important while you're a student or early in your career, or maybe when you're changing careers. But my own experience is I love having mentors. Mentors change, and what you feel you need or seek mentoring in changes constantly too. And I think the other thing is people who have been the recipients of really generous mentors become mentors themselves. And when I look at a lot of the work we do at PopTech, particularly with our fellows program, I would say one of the greatest values that comes out of that program is is not giving a PopTech talk. It's not being part of the boot camp or being in Maine at this ultra wonderful retreat and making colleagues that will be your colleagues for life. I think one of the most important things, and this comes from the fellows themselves, is long-term access to the mentors they meet in that program. You know, when you get in a spot where you aren't sure how to solve a problem, or you're faced with a challenge that may seem overwhelming, having somebody you can go to is really it's like the lifesaver for most people. So nowadays, when I think about all of this, you know, I got to PopTech almost 9 years ago now. I came to PopTech, which is actually 19 years old. The organization is 19 years old. For the first 10 years of its life, it did an annual conference in Camden, Maine, which still happens today. About 9 years ago, there was actually a real request from those who attended the conference for the organization to really look at building out the capacity to act on the inspiration that was generated by the conference itself, either by speakers or by people who were attending. And I was actually recruited to help the board look at the feasibility of a transition like that. Like, where do you get the money? How would you fund this? What would it look like? And Cheryl joined the board at she and I came to PopTech at almost the same time. And over those years, what we created was the ability to incubate projects that are usually global projects, and a project that's in what I would call full incubation mode probably sits with us for 3 or 4 years, with our staff acting as the central project managers and fundraisers for those projects. We do convenings outside of the annual conference that are generally focused on, you know, big, tough challenges, and they tend to be exploratory in nature. They aren't necessarily convenings to answer a question, but to explore an issue and look at potential solutions. And as we started doing that work, we realized, particularly in the incubator space, if you were going to incubate projects, you really needed an easily accessible expertise pool. Like if you're working on an mHealth project, you know, having access to people with deep knowledge and expertise in mobile platform development makes it easier because you don't have to spend a year looking for them. You know who they are already. So a lot of the instinct to build the Fellows Program was to create an expertise pool, and essentially that pool of now almost, I think it's around 160 alumni fellows, it is the innovation engine of the organization. And it's a pool we tap into routinely. About 2/3 are social innovators and entrepreneurs, and the other third are working scientists. So that's kind of an interesting mix if you think about it, because people come with different types of training and different ways that notions of how to solve problems. At the heart of our mission as an organization is a deep belief in the power of collaboration as an actual tool for impact and change. So the work we do never rests with PopTech being a solo player. Most of our work revolves around deeply collaborative endeavors, and we tend to use an interest. I don't know if you guys talk about models of collaboration. There are actually lots of different models or ways one collaborates, particularly if you're collaborating toward a defined end goal. The model that is the best fit for us, and the one we've pretty much used all along, is a constellation collaboration model, where if you think of a constellation, there's a body in the middle and everything else is orbiting around it, usually in concentric rings. So PopTech tends to sit in the middle as a project manager, or the hub of the wheel, you know, with specific responsibilities and obligations. And then, you know, we will look at what is this project, who are the key players, and those players sit in the closest ring, and there may be 2 or 3. And then you have ancillary complementary partners that go out in further rings, and the ring way out may be one a little planet in that orbit is somebody or some organization you tap into only periodically, and your closer circle are those who are going to be directly impacted by the outcomes of that project. Obviously, as I've touched on, we really rely on our network to do most of our work. Our staff is small. PopTech's a very small, nimble organization. We have our home base up in Camden, Maine, where the organization was founded. But we have small staff scattered between Camden, New York, Boston. A lot of our work is international, so wherever the work is, we'll have people stationed there working on projects. And I think it's been interesting because it enables us to tap into a really diverse set of projects, because we don't then spend a bunch of time hiring up. We simply tap into the network, and some of that work is just an exchange because you're comrades or colleagues, and other times it's more formal work over a longer period of time, which is dealt with contractual agreements. I'm going to give you 2 examples of incubator projects, because I think they really touch on the scope of what social innovation is really about, and what it means to be working in communities and with communities, what it means to have a team that's extremely diverse and made up of multiple partners. So the first project we ever incubated, ironically, was an HIV/AIDS project. And I did not pick the project. When I came to PopTech, it was already on the docket, which was sort of ironic because they were talking about this solution they had. And I'm going to tell you the failures. All good projects have failures, right? Mm-hmm. Because if they don't, you probably didn't push the envelope hard enough. This one, the failure was actually rather embarrassing and preventable, and it's a funny story. Cheryl is smiling and smirking. So this was an HIV/AIDS project based in South Africa, which had at the time the highest reported incidence of HIV and AIDS in the world. And to this day, they're still, in terms of reported cases, I mean, you don't know what the real case reports are in lots of countries in the world because there's underreporting or no ability to report cases. But South Africa had a gigantic problem, and such a big problem that it actually leveled a huge segment of the population. The loss of life for people between the ages of 18 and 35 was huge. And today you see that, when you look at workforce and things like that, there's an actual hole in the age demographic because so many people died of HIV/AIDS and complications of tuberculosis, which is a secondary part in that country. So we had a clinical team on the ground that was really looking for ways to deal with improving access to and providing factual information about testing and treatment. And one of the biggest reasons people were dying of AIDS in South Africa at that time, around 2007, where some people can die of AIDS in the United States today because of treatment failures or resistant virus. That is uncommon. In South Africa, people were dying daily because they weren't treated. And so they said, we really want you guys to help us figure out how we can improve access to testing, treatment, and make sure there's factual information going out. So some colleagues at PopTech, and this was before my arrival, co-opted a program that created a fake doctor, like a kiosk that was emulated a doctor's visit. And it was like a little cartoon doctor, And they had tested this at the University of Connecticut, and it actually was not well received even by American clinics, but they decided to roll this out. And then they actually showed a video during their presentation of the kiosk. First of all, they said you need to use the mouse to click on it, and the people that were using it were naive to how computers work. So they had the mouse up on the screen of the computer, trying to click it on there. And or they just bashed the things because they were pathetic and culturally incorrect. So we had this really embarrassing failure. But the good thing is, out of that came a wonderful project that ended up being one of the earliest uses of mobile technology for healthcare, particularly around public health mass messaging. So that project ended up involving a clinical partner in South Africa, a mobile tech developer in South Africa, Frog Design did all the interactive design work on the project. And over the course of a 2-year period, we sent over 1 billion text messages, providing factual information in the form of a 140-character text message with an ability to press a button and connect with the National AIDS Hotline for more information and referral. During the time the project was running, the volume to the National AIDS Hotline went up 400%, which is quite remarkable. And when we would turn the system off to see what happened, it would go back to baseline, turn it on, back up. So, the project was extremely successful in getting factual information out and helping people connect to the care they needed. Second part of the project had to do with appointment reminders and medication reminders set out by mobile messaging, which is to this day is still in use across all the AIDS clinics in South Africa. And the last segment is the development of a self-HIV test kit, which is looking like that will become a reality by the end of next year. Project that started in 2008 and achieved its early goals within the first 2 years, and is now about to achieve its really big endpoint. What was interesting about this project is the eclectic nature of the partners. So one of the things we really needed to do was think of creative ways to captivate the attention of the public so that people didn't ignore these messages like they were advertising. So one of the groups we worked with was Ghetto Rough Records, which is the big hip-hop label in South Africa. And we actually went to them and said we would really love their big guy, Zola, who would be the equivalent of like John Legend here, to do some public service announcements. And the head of Ghetto Rough Records said, first of all, he's not reliable. You don't really want him. But I have all these young guys, and if you train them, they will actually be great spokespersons for you. So we put together a boot camp to train a bunch of South African hip-hop artists, and this is what happened.
Sure. Sanibona. Igama lami uMalik. Mina ngifuna ukusikhohle kancane nge-TB. Sike sijabule sicule nje sonke sibe mnandi. Everybody should know they can have a second chance in life.
My name is Malik Zwane. We're from a record company called Ghetto Rough. What we're gonna do, we're musicians, right? So we felt we can spread the message through our music, but we needed to see what is going on before we preach it to other people.
So now, say what? Live your life.
I just felt, you know what? I need to go do this. This is what I'm supposed to do. Because I lost a sister through this thing.
So now, live your life.
I'm shocked because where I'm from, the stuff is not shown to me. We don't read about this kind of stuff.
Because like most of people, they die nowadays and they die without knowing what kills them. So it's important for people to test now. and I think it's from me, Fisto, as Gumshev. I'm also ready to check.
So now, live your life. So now, live your life. Let everybody go.
And the guys are actually on the self-test kit. Their images, and they've been a big promoter. So all the prototypes of the self-test kit packaging has the Ghetto Rough guys on it. And to incentivize certain behaviors, you could download ringtones from their music collection. So it was, that's a great example of an unusual partner, where if you want to reach people, you have to look at who are people listening to, particularly certain age groups. So that was a great experience, and that boot camp with them was quite fun.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they're really great guys. The project we've been working on for the last few years and continue to work on today is Peace Text, and again, it's a kind of a little bit different play on a mobile messaging technique, and it really looks at the question we have. Well, our hypothesis was that you could use text messages to prevent or interrupt violence, particularly large-scale violence that was being perpetrated by rumor mills, things like that. And we originally started this work with a group in Chicago called Cure Violence, which is a very renowned program in the U.S. that targets gun violence in particular, and they look at gun-related violence as a communicable disease. It's run by a bunch of public health people, and their notion is that if you can isolate violence and prevent its spread like you would the flu, you can cut down the rates of gun-related killings. And their model works extremely well. In the neighborhoods they work, the gun shooting rates are decreased by about 73%. Their program is now in a number of communities. In fact, in Brooklyn, in the area they work, there hasn't been a gun-related shooting in about 2 years. Mostly attributed to their work. So we started to work with them. They came to us and they said, look, our model works really well, but it's completely dependent on us hiring violence interrupters who work face-to-face on the community in the street. And that model has a lot of challenges because they can't hire enough people, either because of funding or because the right people aren't around. So could we use technology to change the reach of our workers? And we spent about a year working on the south side of Chicago with the Cure Violence team, and we created a whole public service campaign run through mobiles that was really targeted at changing community norms about violence. We created an update system that sent out how many shootings there were, a week, and the idea is you could see the trend going down. We worked with a really great organization in Washington, D.C. called Revolution Messaging, which actually they were the designers of President Obama's first run for president. He was the first candidate to use mobile messaging as a campaign strategy. So we worked with them, and they created an entire curriculum based on mobile technology tools that could be used with the kind of the segment of the population that was most prone to violence. And it was written in comic book form, so it was easy for people to understand at various ages and with various reading skills. And then we hit a really big bump in the road. So we were really hoping to roll this out. And what we found out is when we did surveys of, how many people in the south side of Chicago actually had access to a working cell phone that had airtime, it was about 23%. In the Kibera slum in Nairobi, one of the poorest areas of the world, it's 95%. So suddenly your public broadcast system is reaching almost nobody. And then we had another problem in that the U.S. telecom companies weren't too keen to be supporting a text messaging campaign that had to do with gun shootings. So we thought, oh, what are we going to do? Because our notion and our hypothesis was that text messaging would have a very persuasive potential, and it could be a tool to prevent violence. So we decided to think about going back to Africa, where we knew there was really good mobile penetration, that we had a team we could work with, a platform developer. And it was about a year before the 2013 Kenyan election. And in the elections of 07 to 08, there was massive election violence, which ended up resulting in the death of about 3,000 people and near civil war in the country. And a lot of the violence was perpetrated by mobile messages and the spread of rumors. So we said, well, if you could use it for bad, could you use it for good? And we ended up working with an amazing local team. Over 70,000 Kenyans in Nairobi opted in the year before the election, and our first messages were around election campaign, kind of election education, because people didn't always understand how to vote. And then we started slowly changing the messages and twisting them a little bit more into why election violence is not a good thing. And we had decision trees about what kinds of messages to send out in what situations. We ended up doing a survey of all those, I think the return rate on the mobile survey for those 70,000 people was about 18%, which is a really high rate of return. And then volunteers did face-to-face interviews. And 95% of those who opted into the survey felt that the messages clearly prevented violence. And when we asked them why they thought that, so there were two groups of people. There were those who perpetrated violence in the prior election and those who did not participate in violence. Those who did not participate in violence said they felt safer with the messages coming out. They were reassured that things were okay and that there was somebody kind of keeping an eye on things. And if something happened, we would send a message in response, so people were getting factual information. When we interviewed those who had perpetrated violence in the past and said, well, what would you think of those messages? They said, well, we kind of felt like somebody was watching us, so we were a little bit less apt to create chaos if somebody was watching. Like, we didn't know if, like, were the police watching, was the government watching, but it deterred acts of violence. So that was great. And this is just a little video of some of that project.
At Ceasefire, our team is our technology. They're from the communities that they serve, and they're credible messengers because they've been there and they've done that. So they're tasked with preventing shootings in the neighborhood and shifting the social norms so that shooting and killing is no longer normal. We know Ceasefire is proven, but we're limited in a sense by the constraints. You know, we're only so big.
PopTech brought together Ushahidi and Josh Nesbitt from Medic Mobile and others to start exploring exactly how this scaling idea by SMS might be implemented. We've partnered with a group called Sisi Ni Amani, which means we are peace in Swahili.
In the 2007 post-election violence, it was like this tribe is being killed elsewhere, so let's also revenge their tribe who are living in our neighborhood. Rumors and the hatred messages were spread by using the phone technology, the SMS. assessing the money right now, we don't want to take any chances. And so that's why we come up with the system of SMS technology. If there is any rumors, we can act very quick and correct using our system.
Our role is to help CC money scale considerably and to introduce this kind of very specific messaging to catalyze behavior change.
We are doing outreach, collecting more numbers of the money system.
We've partnered with other colleagues of ours from the Prekelt Foundation to develop a powerful and dedicated SMS platform that will provide us with some very important SMS messaging features to organize and coordinate this SMS campaign.
The mobile industry has had such a huge success in Africa in reaching 650 million out of 1 billion people. If we could replicate that success and extend on that to be able to reach each and every individual with the right information at the right time, that would be a huge achievement.
While it's been an incredibly exciting past 2 years, the potential is huge, and I think the real excitement lies ahead.
So, I think that captures the spirit of that project. It's a project we're still working on today, and in fact, we've looked at replicating this project in other election situations and in more so in humanitarian relief situations where there's a need to get factual information out to people in refugee camps and situations like that. So. It's a project, as I said, that we continue to work on because the results of our original pilot work were quite good. So back to the original question, when I grew up, I want to change the world. Is that really possible? And I think it's possible to make the world a better place, in that all of us have the ability to do that and play some small role, but the general instinct is that by combining forces and collaborating and working together, we can have much greater impact. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.